I know the game now. I know that rich white people call poor white people trash. And the only reason I know that is because I made so much money last year, the rich whites told me they say it at a cocktail party. And I'm not with that shit. And I stood with them in line like all of us Americans are required to do in a democracy. Nobody skips the line to vote. And I listened to them. I listened to them say naive, poor white people things. Man, Donald Trump's gonna go to Washington and he's gonna fight for us. I'm standing there thinking in my mind, you dumb mother. You are poor. He's fighting for me. And they all looked at me. They could tell who I was voting for just as easily as I could tell who they were voting for. But do you guys know what we all had in common? Not a single one of us looked like we felt good about what we had to do in that booth. We were just doing our goddamn duty.
Yes, we are back here, WLTH 1370 AM. That's 92.7 in the FM dial. If you're nasty, it is December the 19th. Good Lord. Good 6 days before Christmas. And all through the house. 2025. 6:47 in the PM here on WLTH 1370 AM. That is Dave Chappelle talking about poverty, the wealth divide in this country, and that even poor whites are looked down upon by rich white people. That's very relevant in at least in this world that we live in, and it's only becoming more relevant by the day. I just read this great article about, this great essay about poverty. This journalist named Michael Green published this on Substack, and he's basically arguing that 6 figures is what you truly need to get by and to live, not just subsist, but to actually live with a family of 4. And it's very interesting. It really is and it makes a lot of sense, because if you listen to a lot of people who even make $70, $80, $90, $100,000, they don't feel like they're getting by. They really don't. They don't feel like they're getting by. So let's get into what Mr. Green had to say. He writes very specifically that the U.S. poverty line, which is currently set to keep a family out of poverty, is $32,150 for a family of 4. The formula was developed by a woman named Molly Orshansky, who was an economist at the Social Security Administration. In 1963, she observed that families spent roughly 1/3 of their incomes on groceries. And since pricing data was hard to come by for many items, including housing, you could actually calculate that a minimum food budget at the grocery store you can multiply by 3 and establish what was at that point the poverty line. At that point, it made sense. Housing was relatively cheap. If you were a man and you had your wife and your kids, you could rent an apartment or buy a home on a single income. Healthcare was provided by employers, and it cost not that much. It was relatively low. I just found this out. Blue Cross coverage averaged $10 a month in 1963. $10 a month. Good Lord. Really, child care didn't exist that much as a market because most mothers stayed home. Most mothers were stay-at-home moms, or their families helped, or their neighbors helped. So a lot of times people would watch each other's children. So people had families, friends, and neighbors that they would leave their kids with if they had to go to work or something. So there really was not an industry of child care like you see now. Cars were very affordable. And, college tuition could be covered with a summer job. You see people talk about this all the time. You see boomers. Okay, boomer. You see boomers and you see people from the silent generation talk about all the time, oh, I worked in the mill for a summer and I paid my whole college tuition for the year. Or I worked at Dairy Queen and I bought a car, something like that. Yeah, you could do that back then. Can't do that now. When you retired, that meant a pension income instead of, a 401k, which you have to fund yourself. But many things have changed since 1963, as you all know. The cost of housing and health care, which is the largest household expense for a lot of families, have exploded. Employer insurance coverage has shrunk while the deductibles have grown exponentially. Now, child care is a very lucrative market. I was shocked to find out how much people pay for child care. People who have children, how much they pay for child care every month. It is wow. I genuinely don't know how you who have children are able to pay that. Child care has become a market, and that market has become expensive. And college, we talked about before with Ronald Reagan, when I did the segment on Ronald Reagan, History's Greatest Monster, about how college used to be affordable until Reagan and the likes found out in the 60s that the majority of the anti-war movement was centered on college campuses. And they went about making college as prohibitive as possible, because they knew that all the smart kids were against the war. So the answer is to have less smart kids. And that's why only over 54% of Americans read at a 6th grade level. We're going to talk about that. I guess probably not next week. Next week, we're going to talk about the biggest stories of the year 2025. So get your comments ready for that. But in a few weeks, we'll probably get into the new study that came out that found that the average American adult reads below a 6th grade level. 54% of Americans read below a 6th grade level. And that's why they wanted you dumb. They wanted you to fight wars. They want you to fight low-wage paying jobs. They want that for you until they can replace you with AI and probably kill you. That's why they keep waging these wars all over the world, and they want you to go fight it. Or they're just going to starve you, or they're going to hope that you kill yourself with deaths of despair from alcohol and drugs and suicide, which is why those things have climbed over the last few decades. But since the 1960s, the labor model has changed significantly. Second incomes are not optional anymore. They are mandatory to maintain a standard of living that one income formerly provided. A second income meant child care became mandatory. And that means 2 cars are now mandatory. In 2024, they found that food at home is no longer a third of household spending. It's 5 to 7%. Housing now consumes 35 to 45% of people's incomes. Healthcare is 15 to 25% of incomes. Childcare is between 20 and 40%. So Michael Green did some math, and he said, look, if you keep Molly Orshansky's formula, that poverty could be defined by the inverse of the food's budget share, you are talking about somewhere between $130,000 and $150,000 a year. Damn. Yes, Florida. Florida and James would not have made it. I mean, they really wasn't making it then, but they really wouldn't be making it today. Not with JJ and Michael and Thelma. No, no. JJ's little after school job wouldn't cut it either, even with that. JJ and Michael might have to be out there slinging rocks in order for the Evans family to continue to survive. I don't even want to think about what Thelma might have to do to help the family survive. She definitely might have to have an OnlyFans account or something. Now, this is quoted for a family of 4 to afford housing, health care, child care, and other necessities. He calculated that they would need at least $136,000 a year. This would mean that the majority of American households are living in poverty by his metric, because the median income in the United States is really about $83,000. And that's with all the rich bastards, sort of dragging up the median. So the question is, does poverty mean that you are completely destitute, or does it mean that you're just not getting by? That's where the controversy is coming in. So I'm going to go into like the national data, the data of the average amount that people around the country spend on these things. Child care, people are spending generally about $32,000 on child care. When you think about that, that is a few thousand a month. And this is around the country. This is New York City and LA and Chicago and everywhere sort of mixed together. On housing, they're spending over $20,000 a year. On food, they're spending about $15,000 a year. On transportation, also about $15,000 a year. On healthcare, over $10,000 a year. Other essentials, over $20,000 a year. The required net income, not gross, but net income would need to be about $118,000. And if you added the federal taxes, the state taxes, and the FICA taxes of roughly $18,500, you basically arrive at the gross income of $136,500. So there are some things that have become cheaper in society, technologically and whatever. But when you add in things like child care, college tuition that many people are paying deep into adulthood, I was shocked to find out how many people have college debts into their 50s and 60s, and even after they've paid the amount that they borrowed because of the interest, they're still paying into their 50s and 60s. These are people who did things the right way. They told everybody, if you don't go to college, you're going to be flipping burgers at McDonald's. And these people, a lot of them went to college, spent hundreds of thousands of dollars, took out all these expensive loans that they were told at 17 and 18 years old to take out, only to end up flipping burgers at McDonald's anyway. Now you wonder why 10% of American women under 25 have OnlyFans accounts? Why young men have become addicted to gambling? All these gambling sites are sprouted out everywhere. Why so many people are selling drugs, using drugs, alcohol. What's the number one risk factor for domestic violence? Unemployment. People are desperate. And so that's why that old school boomer mentality, well, I just worked at Burger King or I worked at McDonald's or I cut hair, I swept up hair at a barbershop and that allowed me to go to college. That ain't gonna work these days, bro. These kids are paying college loans with a 7% interest rate. And then you wonder why the fertility rate is so low, why so many millennials and Zoomers don't have children, aren't getting married. You know, to have the same buying power as 50 years ago, the mid-70s, minimum wage would need to be $66 per hour.
Money, money, money.
Yes, that would be $137,000 a year. 40% of people making over $300,000 are living paycheck to paycheck. That's not from me. That's not from some socialist website or MSNBC or some liberal or leftist thing. That's from Goldman Sachs. Goldman Sachs has found that 40% of the people earning over $300,000 per year are living paycheck to paycheck. This is a crisis, especially for young people. Data from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics have found that between 16 and 24-year-olds, this is just 16 to 24-year-olds, over the last 40 years, they are spending far more on essentials than people did in 1985. Again, this isn't adults. This is young people, 16 to 24, people who should be living the best years of their lives. Vehicle insurance has risen over 140%. Housing has climbed 100%. Food costs have increased. Real wages have only increased a little bit. Young adults between 16 and 24 now allocate a bigger share of their income to necessities than in any time in modern history. Home ownership rates for people under 35 is the lowest it's been ever, at 36%. This is the reality that we're dealing with. And again, all of this is a choice. Again, we don't have to live like this. The rest of the world doesn't live like this. Much of Western Europe doesn't live like this. Place like China. China has a 90% home ownership rate. People go, well, you know, the state really owns it, and the state can come and take your house anytime they want. The state can come in and take your house anytime they want. Don't pay your property taxes. See what happens. You can pay off your house right here in Gary, and if you don't pay your property taxes, what's going to happen? Everything they told you would happen under communism or socialism is happening right now. They told us there'd be food lines and bread lines, and that people would be lined up around the block to get something to eat under socialism and communism. Well, guess what you're seeing all over America now, including places like here in Gary and Northwest Indiana. People lined up around the block. Always remember, again, if you don't get anything else out of this show, remember, the enemy is not external. The enemy is not Russia, it's not China, it's not Venezuela, it's not Iran. It is the people who run this country. It is the elites who run this country. The same ones that George Carlin was talking about 30 years ago. Had we listened to him, we might have been able to stop some of this stuff. But too many Americans didn't, and so this is the reality that we have to live with. All right, folks, when we get back, happy happies! Stay with us here on Straight Outta Cannon with me, Scott Cannon. Be there or be square on WLTH 1370.